happening in Narra or
Absolutely.
ASEAN?
Well, absolutely. Thank you, sir. I'm really honored to be here first. And in speaking of technology, I always look at SMART in terms of inclusivity and resilience and improving the public services. That's the key concept I want to share first. And then how do you put technology there? Data.
Yep.
So I've seen so far that data helps a lot in decision makings. For example, there are instances not only in Narra, but in the ASEAN, which is the BIMP-AGA sub-region, where money were made to be given to communities based on the data we submitted.
Yep.
I'm a development planner. I prepare grants, proposals, and I use technology to gather data now.
Right.
The process called design thinking.
Yes.
So when we do design thinking now, we cannot do a model where we do community clustering. So we go to Kampung, we use the typical model of meta cards and other traditional models to get the information.
Right.
But then again, to have a database and cluster the group is the important part. Because when you cluster them, they have a solid voice, and then the government or the development partners will know it will go to a bulk of people. Anyway, that's how I see innovations coming.
Right. So what you're saying is that it's not to treat individuals just as individuals, but communities or clusters.
Clusters.
And be able to deliver development or aid or support using this kind of understanding of clusters.
Yes, using data, which is amazing.
Fantastic. What are the biggest challenges in taking a successful pilot project from one city and adopting it in other parts of ASEAN?
Well, one of the things that I've seen so far is because I work with small kampongs, I work with big villages, and even cities. One of the major challenges first, scalability. There will always be a different model in each communities. So one model cannot be scaled in another community, which means you have to be agile. As an innovator, you have to find ways to create a systematic approach in the processes, in the legalities to make it really institutionalized. But the process of gathering or harnessing the data should be unique per districts. So that's one of the challenges that we've seen so far when we talk about development. Second is funding. A lot of funders, whether it coming from private investments or impact investors, will still need ROI, right? Return of investments. But now it depends upon the person if they are really driven towards the impact, because the impact should be measured, there should be proper indicators. And the major challenge of development planners or even innovators is really having a very reliable data that shows that the indicators are really right and proper. And there's an issue about third-party service provider who will validate the data. So you need to really have a very strong assessment tools or partners to come up with those reliable data. And I think those are the two challenges that we've seen so far to make the funding more reliable to be distributed to the people.
Sure. So what I am hearing is that, you mentioned data, being agile a number of times, really using data to drive decisions, to drive monitoring. But no, we all know that sometimes data is really not there. Or there's a cost to actually acquiring the data.
There is a cost,
Or the data may change. I mean, you may do one survey today, 6 months later is something
Change
else.
immediately, right?
How do you actually make sure your data is up to date? And in terms of
real time. Well, there are different platforms that we can use. Let's go to the most practical ones. There is we call Facebook. There's like X. There's Instagram or TikTok for the young ones. So all of these are existing platforms that you can use to do your own way to gather information, and that's the most practical ways. But for those, like for example, you're government driven. You're like me. I'm a project manager now with the government. It's very necessary to work with the planning office to allocate funds of maybe quarterly data gathering, because like I always tell to even my leaders who makes decision, that decisions should be based on real-time data. And some data may not evolve in the next 3 months, but plans should be changed every 2 years. So because now in this time where everything seems to be like volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, the agility to really understand the current changes should be really, really good. It's not, there's a model to do all of this, like a Scrum method and all of this data gathering.
Can you take what you're speaking about down and give a really concrete example, something that our listeners can identify with?
Absolutely. I would like to share. For example, right now, there are some projects related to agriculture that people are like in the production of rice in Narra, for example. So now, before, the main industry of Narra is just rice.
Yes.
But because there is a huge importation of rice now, because Vietnam is trying to be more competitive, Thailand, globalization is coming in.
Yes.
The tariff in Philippines now was taken off, so
Yes.
all rice can come in now, but
Right.
in a higher tariff.
Yep.
There's cartel of rice coming in.
Yes. Yes.
So those changes of global trading affects the production of Narra, and how we were able to adapt is we had to shift our ability to plant from rice to soybean now, corn, coffee, cacao, and all of it cannot be just like based on one decision. Every 3 months we check the farmers, the capability. Maybe they're not suited to produce corn.
Right.
Maybe they're good in organic vegetables.
Right.
So the agility must be there now for the planners to come up with strategy to base it on the strength of the communities also. Not just to be agile in getting the information, but to be agile in distributing the different kind of services to the people.
Right. That's a great example. What metrics or evidence do you believe are the most important in improving that citizen-focused innovation has truly improved quality of life? I mean, from the citizen's point of view, sometimes they see all these government programs, but they don't really see it improving their lives or what the core problems in their life. So how do you measure kind of a quality of life improvement?
Well, one time in Bhutan, there's what we call gross domestic happiness. I used to remember I used ChatGPT AI to come up with metrics to measure the well-being of a person, because I always tell to some people, it's not always money that defines a people's satisfaction. You can be in a town where there's a lot of food, you don't have millions, but you have a good place to sleep, you have a good education system, healthcare support, and people can live comfortably, and the last salaries they're getting is enough for them to buy food. I think that is a good enough for me to say they're living a happy life. And a lot of people forget that aside from GDP, which is economists will use to measure success, for me, we should consider also monitoring the well-being of the people.
Right.
Yes, I'm not that rich, but do I have access to healthcare? Do I have access to education? Do I have access to all the services that I need? Because that's what people needs right now. Basic access to basic needs.
So you're talking about metrics that actually address basic needs?
Access
Health,
to basic needs.
education, nutrition,
Yes.
maybe shelter. So kind of bring it down to their lives and measure those things rather than say
not just GDP, which is all about salaries.
Yeah, definitely. So looking ahead, how should ASEAN cities prepare their citizens, for these big changes that are coming?
Yeah, how do we prepare? Well, one thing is, because my family is also in politics, and this is something I always tell my dad when he runs the communities, that it's very important for the people to understand that the world is changing in terms of industry, which means technology comes in sometimes to make life a little bit faster, more efficient, and there are traditional business models will not work in the future, but definitely will need human resource. So technical and vocational skills should be developed. I always tell the government, maybe we should develop more institutions that invest on vocational skills rather than traditional schooling. Don't get me wrong, I love 4-year degrees, but right now we need people who can build mechanics, and do all of this short courses, and yet very practical in terms of innovation and technology.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Anyway, John, I think your insight is really important. I think what I heard from you, to recap, is being data-driven, being metrics-driven, in a way consulting the people and seeing it from their point of view, right?
That's good.
And this will then help making sure that the government's effort actually bear results.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, sir.
And all the best in the next few days.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.